Hello everyone, Merry Christmas. I hope you've had a good one and all the best for the new year. Let's look at the Sir Jim deal and pros and cons. Let's look at the pros to start off with a positive. The biggest positive is that he's got control of the football side of things. That's massive for me. And then the potential appointments of what sounds like a football board. People like Jean-Claude Blanc apparently already in place. And then potentially people like Dan Ashworth and Paul Mitchell. Who knows if that will actually happen, but they're exciting appointments if they do happen, if one or two of those appointments occur as well. It means we've got a proper football board, which I said after Mourinho left, that's what United need. We need a football board of people who know what they're doing, or at least one key person to oversee the football side of things who's basically running the club. A more competent version of Ed Woodward, really, because he was not a football person. We desperately needed that for a long time, and I think a lot of the problems we've had over the last 10 years wouldn't have been there if we'd have had a proper football person running the ship, and the Glazers could just stay out of the way, really, in many respects. Although they'd still hamper us, I just think it wouldn't have got to this point had we have had that. So it's positive, and I think those appointments will lead to inevitable improvement, incremental improvement, but I think inevitable improvement. So there's definitely positives there. The next positive is quite speculative, really, in a way, because we don't know if there's any clear pathway towards full ownership. But I think another positive would be that 18 months ago we'd have snapped your hand off of this scenario where the Glazers have relinquished quite a big chunk of power, and the football side of things is no longer being run by them. We'd have snapped your hand off of that again, with a guy coming in and becoming actually the biggest single shareholder at the club. Although the Glazers as a family obviously have the collective power, he will have quite a lot of say on what's going on, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, and he'll have I think he's got two members on the football board and two members on the PLC board. And each time he puts money in, he's getting a bit more of a percentage. So it sounds like maybe somewhere down the line there's a potential for change of ownership, which we didn't have 18 months ago at all. So that has to be seen as a positive. In terms of the cons, I feel like where we are now to where we need to be is such a huge gap. And I don't think that Sir Jim Ratcliffe and the people he's bringing in, and it's good that he's putting money into the club, but the very small amount of money compared to what we need, I don't think that is enough to go from where we are to where we need to be, and to correct the wrongs of the last 10 years in particular. The negligence and incompetence of the club has led to untold damage and possibly irreparable damage. And that's why I think, for me, I was so keen on us getting Qatar, because that might not have been perfect, but that would give us the raw ingredients to do what we need to do to bridge that gap, and it might have taken some time. In terms of expertise, I'm sure they'd have got similar types of people in, so that's not a massive deal, but it's the money that's needed and required is so huge. The elephant in the room is still the stadium. So Jim, by all accounts, is putting in £236 million of his own money, and he'll be putting in more as time goes by. But 236 million regarding Old Trafford is a fix up and make do. That's all that is. It's not to make the stadium into a super stadium. And this was always my fear, if we didn't get rid of the Glazers entirely, is that we need a clean break. We need to be able to start looking at things as a proper football club again, and want to be the absolute best in all areas. And the stadium, they still have a big say on, and I don't know how we achieve that with the money that's available. Now maybe it's a long-term project, and if so, then great. At least that's something that's the stadium I'm referring to. That's good. But the stadium's a great metaphor for the club in general. It's falling apart. It's broken. It needs so much money spending on it, and what's being touted around as on the table is not enough. And that's a metaphor for the whole situation, the whole club. One of my mates the other day said perhaps that the talk is that, say for example, an Apple bought the naming rights for Old Trafford, or probably Ineos or whoever, then it would, they'd put in, whoever that was would put in a lot money. Like, but what he mentioned was like 500 million quid. Again, 500 plus 236. Let's just round up to 750. 750 is not going to build you the stadium that we need, that could host boxing events, gigs, be holding finals of the Champions League. I might be wrong, but I don't think it makes it a super stadium in comparison to teams who never even used to, clubs that never even used to be competitors of ours. They've got far better stadiums and far better match day experiences than we have. And there's an awful lot of work that needs to be done with that. And as I say, the stadium for me is a metaphor for the whole situation. I worry a little bit about Sir Jim in terms of how old he is. I don't want to be ageist. 71 isn't old at all, especially not in the modern world that we live in. But with the amount of work that needs to be done, it's probably not the age to be getting involved in something like this. And I've got concerns as to, you know, if something went wrong with that, without wanting to be morbid, what happens then? You know, who's the next person that heads that up? And probably the biggest negative in some respects is that there's no clear pathway to ownership. It still feels to me like the Glazers have got all of the options wide open to them, and they're going to see what happens. If in 18 months, I think was a stipulated time, if in 18 months they decide this isn't really working out as we would want, they could say to Sir Jim, you can buy the club if it's $33 a share. If you can't do that, we can put it back out there and someone can buy the whole club. They could just sit as it is and just kind of just keep things ticking along, if you like, which is what I see the next few years as being. And I think they've probably got the power to some degree or other to just dump Sir Jim if it suited them to do that at some point down the line. So I think all of their different options are open. The thing I will say is what I've always said, they're in cloud cuckoo land if they think that the club is going to be worth 10 billion in any time soon, because it's not. They needed to put £3 billion in, or someone needed to put £3 billion in now to make it worth 10 billion in however long. The Glazers are doing what they've always done, is they're trying to cut corners. They're trying to put a minimum amount in for maximum impact. You can't do that anymore in modern football. Even with experts coming in, even with, and I don't even know if who Ineos are bringing in are experts, but even if, let's say they are, you need money, you need input, you need to show a desire to want to be the best. And if they think that a few people who know a bit more than they do about football coming in plus 200, 300, 400 million pound in the next few years is going to make United worth 10 billion, they're in fantasy world. And I've always said as well, this complete nonsense about a European extended Champions League or the Super League coming back into it, or TV rights. None of that. It's money. It's a steady stream. None of that is game-changing amounts of money which make you turn down £6 billion from Qatar. So, and it doesn't double the value of the club. And United is shit. And with the money that's been put in to try and make us better, we're not going to suddenly become great over a period of the next 2 or 3 years. So where are we doubling in value? It's just not going to happen. So my hope is that after 3 or 4 years or whatever, 3 years, hopefully less time, they realise, oh, even though we've done this and we've hung on to it for another couple of years, it's not making that much of a difference. It's not making the difference that we wanted, that you know, we can now tout the club out there for 10 billion. So let's just call it quits and off we go with the $33 a share by Sir Jim, if he can afford that, or someone else then swoops in. Whoever, I'm happy days as long as they go. There's such a monumental amount of work to do at the club. It is completely broken, and I wish Sir Jim all the best. I really do, and I hope that he's successful. I'd urge him to, you know, he's from the area. We all know that he used to watch United as a kid, and there's no doubt that he will have much more of a positive intent and a genuine motivation to make the club what we all want it to be again. I'm sure he will, and I'm sure just some basic competence will help. But our competition isn't City, Arsenal, Liverpool, and soon to be Newcastle will add to that as well. That isn't our competition. Our competition, if we're being honest right now, is Brighton, Aston Villa, West Ham, Tottenham, and Chelsea, who will come good, I'm sure, at some point. And that's the bracket we're in at the moment. So step one is to get even back into the conversation to move into that the four of City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Newcastle, and that's a big job in itself. To get towards winning titles again is I can't even imagine it happening, to be honest. You've obviously got these charges hanging over City, and hopefully something happens with that. And if they end up, with serious sanctions, as in they end up getting relegated or something like that, I think we're back in the game. Because Arsenal and Liverpool, as much as I hate to say it, have to be our benchmark, because they haven't got bottomless pits of money. They're just well-run football clubs. So fair play to them for what they've achieved in competition to City, who've just cheated. So yeah, it would be great to do it in this more heroic, more noble way. Yeah, of course it would. And they are the two benchmarks. But the only way we're going to do that is get into the conversation for top four in the first place, and then hope that City have these charges proved against them, and that it takes a long time for Newcastle to become a superpower, because I think it will take them some time. So that's the immediate and mid-term future for United, isn't titles and Champions Leagues and things like that. And I said before that's okay, as long as he puts in a structure where football is at the heart of everything, where there's something we can get on board with. I want him to be ruthless. I want him to do what has been needed to be done for many years, which is that Ralph Rangnick open heart surgery, which I did a video on. No one's made any decision. The rebuild hasn't even started under Ten Hag, and whilst the current people are still there running the club, it hasn't even started. So that needs to be done, and I want him to be ruthless. I want him to come in and say, I think I said in the video, 8 out, it might have been 10, 8 or 10, or whatever it was, out, and we need maybe let's be realistic, 5 or 6 in, and we supplement the rest with youth, which harks back to another video that I spoke about, where if you give young players a chance, fans will always be okay with that. Mainu, Dangor, Hannibal, Palestri. Just, I'd rather, if Hoyland's injured or not, or ill or whatever, or not informed, just chuck Hugill in there. Just give some young kids a chance. But I want it to be ruthless, and I want fans can be dangerous. Roy Keane's always said that fans at the times don't know what they're talking about, but I'd love us to have more of a representation in terms of the way that team operates is a representation of us as fans. And Manchester at its heart, in the past, is a working class place where you've got people who go to the game who want you to put a shift in. They want you to try and show personality and care for the team as much as we do. Now, those days probably have gone, but you want to get as close to that as possible. And it is possible at Man United. We were always accused, and it always annoyed me back in the day, of cherry picking players and always getting the best players and always breaking the transfer record, etc., etc., etc. But I think it's a massive misconception, because if we look at, in the early 90s, Roy Keane, we broke the transfer record for Roy Keane at that time. But we didn't then also get Alan Shearer. We got Roy Keane. But if you look at the rest of that team around him, Peter Schmeichel, no one had ever heard of Peter Schmeichel. Paul Parker came from QPR, not from Barcelona or AC Milan or Real Madrid. He came from QPR. Steve Bruce came from Norwich and had quite a few years in the team before he became successful, as was Gary Pallister, the same, but he came from Middlesbrough. Dennis Irwin came from Oldham. Ryan Giggs was a product of our academy, as was Lee Sharp. All right, he came from Torquay, but he was a young kid and developed at United. Ince came from West Ham. Kanchelski's no one had ever heard of. Hughes was in our academy, left and came back. And Cantona was an enigma that no one else wanted to touch. So yeah, we spent a lot on Roy Keane, but you look at the structure around him, we spent money on those players. And it was, I know that was the days before you went out to Barcelona and Real Madrid, and it wasn't as global a game then, but nonetheless, you look at how much money Blackburn spent around that time, and then moving forward into the early 2000s, the money that Chelsea spent, then City. United, yeah, we've always bought the likes of Van Nistelrooy, who was a record signing, and Varane, who was a record signing, and Ferdinand and Rooney. Yeah, we have always done that. But we've also supplemented it with Darren Fletcher, John O'Shea, Johnny Evans, Wes Brown, Paddy Evra, who no one had ever heard of really. Nemanja Vidic, he was plucked from nowhere. So if we have, what I'm saying is, history leaves and success. History informs the future to a point, and success leaves a trail. And look within your own club. Don't look at other clubs. Look at our club. We have a history of being able to get a balance right. And if you've got competent people coming in and running the club, then that does give me some confidence that maybe we can do it this way. But I just feel there's a ceiling, and because the gap is so big from where we are to where we need to be, which circles back around to what I said at the start. But it is where we are. The next few months are going to be really interesting. I'm going to do a video in a minute actually on Ten Hag. We'll post it on another day, and the team and what needs to happen with that. But all the best to Sir Jim, and it is where we are now. That's what's on the table. So good luck, and as always, Glazers out.